Okay, this is maybe the last video in this part of the series, but I wanted to give you sort of general advice about setting a value for your work. This is just a general negotiating technique, just how you should approach, you know, putting value on your work, because most of us don't feel like our work is inherently valuable. Most of us actually think that we're bad at what we do, that we're bad writers, that we're you know an honor to even be considered by a publication for writing. But the truth is that if they're talking to you at all, they see value in you. And your goal in any sort of negotiation is to try to identify how much they think that you're worth, so you get a good price. You don't undersell yourself. And I want to use a little analogy here. Now, back years and years and years ago, I lived in India for about 6 years. And if you've never been to India, it's fine. You should go. But there's one experience that just about everyone who goes to India has to have over and over and over and over again, which is talking with these guys who drive taxi cabs and auto rickshaws to define the fare that takes you from one side of town to the other side of town. And usually what happens is you approach this sort of small little scooter object. There's this guy behind the wheel, and you say, "Hey, I need to go across town to my friend's house." And then he looks at you and says, 200 rupees. It is a totally arbitrary number. He'll say, "My meter doesn't work," or whatever, and he'll say 200 rupees to get you across town. And then you look at him and you realize you have no clue what it actually costs to go across town. But you do know that you're a foreigner and he's looking at you as a sucker. So what you do is say 80 rupees, because that's just what you do. And then he says, 120. And then you sort of settle in the middle until you find a price that you can both agree on. And probably the real price was like 30 rupees, but whatever. You have negotiated a better price than that initial offer. Now, this is sort of the inverse of the Michelle Obama's quote. They go low and you go high. Yeah, and I guess it's not the inverse. In this case, what I'm saying is that in media negotiations, or really any negotiation, you are the rickshaw driver in this. He doesn't know what the value, what you're willing to pay to go across town, but he's willing to give you a shot to see that if he can get more money out of it. For him, he's not making very much anyway. And by the way, 200 rupees is very little money. It's $5. If you were in the States, you'd kill yourself if you realized how little you were paying. But that's beside the point. He's trying to negotiate a high value and you're trying to negotiate a low value. So he has to start out at a high number, right? Because there's no chance you would go to that rickshaw. He says 200 rupees to go across town. And you're like, no, 500. It's a $500 ride. That has never happened in the history of negotiations. So when you're negotiating, you have to start off high. If someone says, "Hey, do you want to write a story for me?" and you don't like just get really uncomfortable and say, "Well, I don't know, maybe $100 for my work." No, that's never going to work. You can always negotiate down. Start at a number much higher than what maybe you think you're worth. Start at, use a guidepost of like $3 a word, and then say, "I'm worth $15,000 for this," and just look at them straight in the face and say, "That's what you're worth." And if they say no, well, then you can negotiate down and find where their pain points are and where your pain points are, where it's no longer worth it for you to work. That's what your lowest pain point. And you never go below that. If it's not worth it, if what you need to survive is $500 that week, don't take 300. That would just be silly. And then, but you don't just start at 300, at 500 either if they're willing to pay 15,000. So start high with your bids, work down to a reasonable number, especially when there's no clear idea what the value is. Now, another way to calculate this is, again, look at their rate sheets, look at the market, see what sort of money they're making, and then make an educated guess of what your value is. And, sometimes you'll lose sales. Like, when I'm negotiating with a rickshaw driver, oftentimes I'll be like, all right, bye. I'll see you later. I'll go to the other rickshaw down the street. And you need to be able to say the same thing, because value in this world is unfortunately arbitrary. There's no true rule to say what is worth something. Like, why is it that sweatshops produce, in China can make a sweater for $1 and they sell it for you to you at Banana Republic for $80? It's not because there was an intrinsic value in creating that sweater. It's just that people were beating down that guy who was making it until there was no opportunity to sustain himself above that model. And yet the middleman or the retailer made all of the money. So what I'm telling you is to bargain up when you're negotiating for anything. It doesn't matter what it is. This is something for all creative industries, writing or otherwise. Value yourself. And, lose some deals. Sometimes go in there and be like, look, if someone wants to reprint an article of yours, say I need $4,000 for it. Sorry. And if they're really only willing to do $1,000 and you don't think it's worth, $1,000 is too little, walk away. And it is a feeling of liberation, because I will tell you that if you have 5 shots at that $5,000 price point before it wasn't worth it, right? 5 people could approach you. If one of them pays you $5,000, you made your whole money. And if 2 of them paid you $5,000, you doubled it. So think in those terms. Try to think about the market, and there is a value of saying no, because it increases your value, and actually people will respect you more. If you're able to to literally walk away from a negotiation for this sort of arbitrary thing called value, they're going to say, oh, well, maybe he's worth more. And I've seen that time and time again. When I've gone out to pitch something, I've set a price which is a fair amount of money, and because they paid more, they felt better about it. It's human psychology, and it should work to your advantage when you can make it do that. So sort of that's my last lesson for this basic part of the course, but it would be great if I got questions. If I had a community of people here asking me for more information about writing, I would love to continue contributing to this and helping you guys make your careers better, to think about these broad principles of mixing business and your creative life, because in the end of the day, I want us all to be creative, all to do the work we want to do and get paid for it, because it's not impossible to be middle class. I made it. Middle class, bitches. Yeah. I always wanted to say that. I did it. This is not like gangster life. This is not like, I'm walking around with Lamborghinis and stuff like that. It's just like, this is what it means to be middle class in the creative field. And I did it, and you can too.